Hi, I'm Ellie Waddington, a hypnobirthing teacher, positive birth advocate, and mum to two feral but adorable children. You are listening to the Bell Mama Hypnobirthing and Positive Birth podcast. This podcast is here to empower you with the tools, knowledge, and confidence you need for a calm, positive birth experience. Together, we'll tackle the big questions, bust some myths, and share practical tips for your journey into motherhood. Plus, you'll hear inspiring real birth stories from mums who've been there, and expert guests sharing their wisdom and insights. Whether you're planning your first or adding to your tribe, I've got you covered, so let's dive in. Hey gorgeous mama, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. We had a little bit of a break last week because I was on half term. Up in Northumberland, our half terms are a little bit different to the rest of the country, so everyone else had their half term the week before, but ours was last week, and it's always really funny, you know. I absolutely love having both my kids at home and spending time with them and being able to go out and do these activities and these day trips. You know, we went to the Newcastle Museum, we went to the zoo, we went swimming, we did all these fun things, but it's just so exhausting. It's just so full on, you know, cramming all the activities and having everything to do in these 1 week bursts throughout the year. And particularly because my husband, he's got a lot of work on. He's got a project on at work at the moment, which means that he's working very long hours. It's not forever. He's normally at home a lot more, but it just happened to coincide that he's got a big work project on at the moment, which means he's doing long hours. And so I was doing a lot of the childcare myself, a lot of the bedtimes myself. And so, you know, I get to the end of half term and I'm thinking, oh, thank goodness they're back at school. But I feel really guilty for thinking, oh, thank goodness my kids are going back to school. You know, does anyone get that? Anyway, it's a real kind of bittersweet thing when they go back to school because, you know, you miss them, but at the same time you enjoy having your freedom back. But anyway, so that's what I was doing last week. I was surviving half term. So let's talk about this week's podcast episode. So I have the most beautiful, amazing birth story from Eleanor Marshall. She is a fellow hypnobirthing teacher. I always feel really weird calling other people Eleanor because that's my name, although obviously you know me as Ellie. Eleanor is my name, and you know there's very few people in my life now that actually call me Eleanor. So my mother-in-law insists on calling me Eleanor because she absolutely hates nicknames. So whatever your nickname is, she'll always call you by your entire name. So she calls me Eleanor, but that's it. So saying Eleanor out loud, I don't know, it's a bit of a funny one for me. But anyway, that's by the by. Eleanor's birth story is absolutely amazing. And the reason it's amazing is because it's a really beautiful, positive C-section story. And this kind of, you know, for a lot of people, the idea of having a C-section is like the absolute opposite of what they want. You know, there's a lot of fear around C-sections. It's a major surgery. And Eleanor's approach to this, she kind of approached this knowing that C-section was going to be extremely likely, if not inevitable. And so she really lent into her hypnobirthing, and it kept her so calm and so prepared and so, you know, joyful through that birth experience. As she looks back on this experience with such positivity and such joy, and that really comes through in the way that she tells this story. And this is such an important story to hear because there are lots, you know, C-section rates are ever increasing in the UK and everywhere else around the world. Lots more people are electing to have C-sections. You know, the emergency C-section rate is rising as well. And so even if you are planning a home birth, a free birth, whatever, there's still a possibility that you might decide to accept a C-section. And in that case, you have to be prepared for that. You know, always have a plan C. Always have that prepared. Always know what you are going to do in that eventuality. And so Eleanor's story just really highlights the different ways that you can use your hypnobirthing to stay calm, to stay positive all the way through that birth experience. And something else I like as well is that she had a little bit of a negative experience afterwards where there was a midwife that was, you know, prioritizing something different than Eleanor wanted to prioritize. I won't spoil that for you, you know, no spoilers. But Eleanor, again, with her hypnobirthing and the work that she and, you know, the research that she'd put in ahead of time, she was able to advocate for herself and get what she wanted through the hypnobirthing and through the preparation that she did. So without further ado, here is Eleanor's amazing positive hypnobirthing C-section.
Well, hello, thank you so much for having me today. So as a hypnobirthing teacher myself, this is a really lovely opportunity to share my birth story and all the tools that I use throughout my pregnancy and my postpartum. So to start off with, I think for a little bit of context, it's important to say that this is my second birth experience. My son was a really positive induction experience. And straight after that birth, I was really looking forward to having another baby and going through the whole birth experience again. And in my mind, I was hoping for a natural birth as possible. But as we know with pregnancy, that doesn't always go to plan. So this is where I feel hypnobirthing really, really took a whole um it just really helped me on the roller coaster of my daughter's pregnancy. So in a nutshell, before I sort of tell the whole story, her birth was an emergency cesarean. And like I said, it really taught me how powerful hypnobirthing tools are, and they're so vital during pregnancy and postpartum. And it made it so clear to me how you feel about your birth experience, no matter what twists and turns the journey takes, it is so important. So essentially, it all started with reduced movements, which I was very used to with my little boy. I was no stranger to going on the CTG monitor, but it just felt very different this time round. So I was continuously having reduced movements, so they thought it was best for me to have a scan, just check everything was okay. And I was really glad that I accepted that scan, and we found out that essentially I had some complications with my umbilical cord and also the placenta as well. Um, and it was affecting her growth. So with that, I was very aware that I could easily be on this sort of growth pathway, which, as we know, can often lead to the situation with induction. So I knew straight away I was going to have to be quite creative with my birth preferences and all the conversations I had. Um, so straight off with that consultant, this all happened around 28 weeks, I'd say. This all sort of kicked off. Um, it did catch me off guard that there was something kind of medically untoward, and it became quite apparent that it was the safest thing for my baby to be born no later than 37 weeks. Um, and I asked all the questions, talked about all the absolute risks, what difference would it make if I was to leave it an extra week, all of that kind of thing. Um, and I also, as well, was really interested to know really like the big picture and how sort of serious my situation was. And my consultant was amazing and really respected my choices. And he explained to me that he saw mothers like me all day long, 5 days a week, and possibly once a month, there was a real emergency sort of situation, and it was sort of straight to delivery. And I just knew that that was going to be me. I had this little feeling, a niggle, that it probably was going to be me. And with that, I really, really leaned into my hypnobirthing. So I felt in control should that happen. So, as I said with my son, I had a really positive induction experience, and I accepted the induction because my instincts really told me that it was the right decision. And it really was for me. This time round, I just didn't have that feeling. And I just felt in my heart that my body and my baby as well would not be ready for that positive induction experience. And I really did trust my instincts on that. So when my consultant did start talking about inducing me at 37 weeks, straight away we discussed the alternatives. Ultimately, I felt really in control, and I went away and I really did my research. Dr. Sarah Wickham is amazing, as we know, and just spent a lot of time deciding what the best outcome for me would be. So I did decide that I would opt for an elective cesarean should everything continue sort of as a smooth roller coaster, if you will. Um, so I essentially knew that I was either preparing myself for an elective cesarean, 37 weeks, or an unplanned cesarean, an emergency cesarean before that. So I, like I said, I really had to lean into my hypnobirthing here because for me, cesarean birth, before I discovered hypnobirthing myself, was something that I just didn't I didn't want to do, um, mainly because of the thought of the epidural. So once I started my hypnobirthing journey, I realized that all of my preconceived beliefs were just based on other people's experiences, and also, of course, social media and stories that weren't my own, and stories that actually weren't very reliable. So hypnobirthing really helped me with that, especially with all the relaxation techniques, listening to audios that were all based on calm cesareans, and really releasing my fears as well. So I went essentially from having scan every week from 30 weeks to twice a week. And every scan we went to, me and my husband, our bags were packed. We didn't know whether we were going to be having a baby that day. And to start with, that was quite an experience. But then over time, because we were going twice a week for 6 weeks, we got quite desensitized to it, and we did really relax into the situation. So before each scan, we'd be sat in the waiting room. My consultant had often quite a long list of other people to see, so we were often waiting there quite a while. And we just have really positive chats about meeting our baby, whenever that would be. Would it be today? Looking at photos of my son as a newborn, and just really trying to like get those happy hormones flowing and that really positive mindset. And it was quite funny. On the day she was actually born, I was just really expecting to be going home for dinner and having whatever it was we were having for tea that night. And I was just really thinking about the washing I wanted to do, the bits and bobs I needed to finish. And I'd actually polished off a whole packet of M&S cookies, washed down with some raspberry lemonade. And I was just very relaxed in that waiting room. But then when we were finally called in to see my consultant, I actually had my phone like recording the conversation that was going on. And I was in there for less than a minute. So my consultant started scanning me, and straight away he just said the words that I will never forget, which was, "It's time to have a baby."
Time to have a baby.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Reverse
okay.
DDF. So, what we'll do, I know.
No, it's okay.
I'm
No,
gonna
it's
shock you.
No, it's okay.
Because
No.
the weight is unimportant at this stage.
Okay.
What is the most important
Yeah.
is your baby is well enough to be on the outside.
Yeah.
So it'll be a cesarean section
No,
inside
I
the
am
next
fine. Yeah.
30
allowed
to
to cry, you
60
don't have to
minutes.
be
Yeah.
In the what,
Don't worry.
sorry? The next.
30 to 60 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to labour ward, we'll put you on the monitor and we'll tee you up for theatre.
Fuck, sorry. Okay.
I know, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, baby.
Remember, we take no
Friday.
risks with your baby.
Oh my
I
God.
always promise you.
Oh my God.
We take no
Okay.
risks. Come on through. Let's go.
Right.
Okay.
Wasn't expecting that.
No, neither was I. Haven't seen reversed in a while, but there you go.
And you can hear me on the recording go, "Oh, okay," and start asking questions. Okay, why now? Why aren't we waiting? What is it? What can you see? What are the risks? Going through all of that. And then he explained that it was really important that baby was born as quickly as possible, because 70% of my placenta had failed, and that baby really needed to be born within the next 30 to 60 minutes. And on that recording, you can hear me going, "Oh, okay." And then suddenly I just say, "We're having a baby, let's go." And it was like all that preparation I've been doing, we were just ready to go. It was an emergency situation, but for me, it wasn't. We were planning for this. And I felt, and I know that my husband felt, really prepared for whatever was to come. So with hypnobirthing, we really lean into the fact that we know that if we believe something to be negative, um, we look for all those negative signs, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? So I had the opposite, and I was really looking for all the signs that this was going to be absolutely empowering and exactly as I wanted it to be. So we were taken straight to a delivery room, and I realized it was the room that I gave birth to my son in, and straight away that felt like a beautiful sign. And then my really kind midwife came over and started chatting to me, and her name was Jenny, who's my best friend's name. So I was like, "There's another sign." And we were just having a really good conversation. I told her about how I've been doing hypnobirthing. It's really important to me that this is a calm and empowering experience, and she was so on board with that. Um, we FaceTimed, my husband and I FaceTimed our little boy, had a little chat with him, and it was just, I think from an outside perspective, when I look back on that experience, I can kind of like see myself sat on the bed, having compression socks fitted, joking with the midwife about, oh, I shaved my legs last night just in case this would happen, and just being really light-hearted, joking with the anaesthetist that I literally couldn't have eaten more before going into surgery, and just keeping it really light-hearted. And this was absolutely because I was taking control of what I could. Meanwhile, my husband was to the side talking to who would be my surgeons, and it was a really serious situation, but it was almost as if I just had sort of kind of blinkers on, really, to focus on what I could control. So my husband was handling sort of the serious conversation of why we really did need to go to surgery ASAP. Um, but like I said, I was just in my own little world, really, like my birth bubble, even though it wasn't anything like I had hoped for. Like I said, we got ready, and I remember I had a little hat for her, should she need a hat when she was born, and I put it on my tummy and she was kicking the little hat, and I just felt like it was going to be a beautiful experience. Um, and yeah, I was walked to the surgery, to the theatre, and to me, this felt like the most powerful walk of my life. I was walking I was walking into the theatre, but really I was walking to meet my daughter, and it just felt incredible. I think it's just amazing as a mother to be walking into a situation where you know you're going to have major abdominal surgery, but to just be really focusing on that you're going to meet your daughter and see their little face was just so powerful. And so I walked in there, and because I had done so much preparation as to what the room would be like, I wasn't put off by the number of people that were in there, the fact that it was so bright. There was clearly some panic going on, given the circumstances, but I just, like I said, sort of kept my blinkers on, stayed in my birth bubble. Um, and I'm not sure if I mentioned earlier, I think a part of the cesarean sort of worry for me was the thought of having an epidural. Again, based on people's experiences, like we talk about the size of the needle and things like that. And I can genuinely say that it was such a positive experience, so much more than I ever could have imagined. Um, and when I was having it done, I just visualized going to my happy place, which was just a lake in California, where I went as a child, and I really genuinely felt so calm, and I actually found it quite amusing lying down and just not being able to move my legs. Um, I really did just look for all the happiness in that situation. I made sure that my ECG dots were on my back, that I had access in my robe for skin to skin. And really all of the things I could control, I had in place. I had my music playing. Um, the midwives were dancing, saying how like, what a good playlist, this is great. Everyone was on board. And I think it did come down to our energy as a couple. Um, and I do remember the midwife saying, like, I've never seen anything like this. Like, your heart rate is so calm. Like, you literally could be anywhere right now. This is so impressive. And in truth, I was obviously lying on an operating table, but my body was, but my mind really wasn't. And I really did feel so calm. Um, and at the same time, there was another midwife. I have to say, the midwives were just amazing. They were so invested in having this beautiful experience for me. She took my phone and she was taking photos of all the things that she knew I would never see with my own eyes, which I'm so, so grateful for. Um, and then, yeah, throughout my birth, my husband was by my side, and we discussed ahead of it that it was likely that my daughter Poppy was going to need some attention from the paediatricians. So I knew that there was a little side room that she'd likely be taken to. And she was immediately. She was struggling and she needed that help. But like I said, we'd agreed that my husband would then go and be with her, and that's what I needed. Um, so when that happened, I remember just seeing little glances of her feet from the side of the room, and I hadn't seen her face, but I could just see these little feet like kicking away. And I was just so grateful. There was a midwife like above my head, and I can't really think what she looked like. But she just continued stroking my face, just like Matt had been doing, and just like stroking my hair, keeping me calm. Um, and I chose at that moment to just sort of close my eyes and go inwards because I knew that my baby was in the safest hands, and right now in this moment I just needed to keep myself really calm. So I went inwards, and then not long after, my husband carried her over with this adorable little rainbow hat on, and she was placed by my face like upside down. Um, but she was so close to my face, she looked like she had one eye, and I couldn't really see what she looked like. So I asked for her to be put for some skin to skin, and that was so magical. But unfortunately, the best thing for her was to then get some more medical attention. So I had about a minute of her with some skin to skin. Um, and then she went to get the help that she needs. And then during this time, I'd heard about when you have a cesarean, you can often feel really nauseous, which then really kicked in. But straight away, I communicated that, and I was given the anti-sickness medication. Um, and again, I just stayed really calm. I kept my eyes closed because I knew that I wasn't going to gain anything from looking around the room, trying to see where she was. And there was a midwife that then came in partway through, and I don't quite know why she came in. I think maybe there was maybe a staff changeover or something. And so I never saw her face, but she was right by me and she could see my daughter, but obviously I couldn't really. And she was just saying really kind things like, she looks so much like you. She's going to be with you really, really soon. And I just focused on her voice. Um, and I knew that everything would be okay, but for now, this is how it was. So, a little later, when birth was sort of finished, and the surgeons had finished, I was taken to a delivery room, um, and my husband at this point, I'm not quite sure what he was doing, but I was with Poppy, with her next to me, but it became clear that she was struggling. So she was then taken to neonatal, and I was told she'd be there for like up to an hour. We're just going to do some checks on her. Um, but and so I was there with a cup of tea, and I then sent my husband to go to neonatal with her. And it was very surreal because I'd gone within the space of an hour to being pregnant in a waiting room, eating M&S cookies, to having had a baby, and then being sort of on my own in a delivery room with a cup of tea. And it was at this point that I knew I was going to have to really pull out all the stops of my hypnobirthing. And I had the strength to do it, but I was going to really, this is where the hypnobirthing was going to really come into its own. Um, so a while later, I was actually taken to the ward, and I was put in a room full of other mothers with their babies beside me, and I had an empty cot, which is not what you want, of course. So it was then made clear that Poppy needed to stay in neonatal. She wouldn't be coming back. And like I said, this is really where my hypnobirthing came in. So I really focused on the fact of what I could control and what I couldn't. And I knew that my husband and my baby were at that point together. He was looking after her. That's where I needed him to be. And I did everything I could to remain calm. But I really was so desperate to see her. I knew the importance of skin to skin. I wanted to establish breastfeeding, and it was frustrating that at this point in time I had a midwife that was not listening to me and was quite dismissive. So I really had to rise above that and advocate for what I knew I needed and what was important to me, despite her saying that it wasn't important to establish breastfeeding and to see her. And I appreciate that she was concerned about my well-being. Um, However, when she said, so Poppy was born around 5 p.m. and it was now 1 a.m. at this point, and I'd seen her for about probably like 2 minutes. So she then said that I could maybe go and see her the following afternoon. And I just knew, like, the fiery side of me came out. There was no way that was happening. I couldn't rest as I was being told to. I couldn't just sleep until I had seen her. So it really wasn't just a shut down conversation. I created it into a discussion. And I really did fight my corner and explain that I had to see her, that it was in the best interest for my recovery. Um, and sometime later, the midwife did agree that she would allow me to go up to neonatal and see her. And I did, and it was absolutely amazing. And as soon as I'd done that, I was able to return to the ward, where she then wheeled away the cot because I wouldn't need it. That was hard. But again, I just really leaned into my relaxation. I could hear the other babies in the room, put my headphones on, and I really focused on what I could control. So throughout that night, my husband was backwards and forwards to me and to her. just keeping an eye on us both, which was so appreciated. And following that, I then the next morning I went to see her. My husband wheeled me up there, but we were told quite clearly, you have to return to the ward for your pain relief, which I was happy to do. I would go get my pain relief and I would come back. But as we know, with the wonderful maternity system, there is always it's always so busy on the wards, and unfortunately, at that point in time, the midwives that were working weren't able to get to me at the time that my medication was due. So it actually meant that I went over around 3 hours without that pain relief. And at this point, I decided to take control, and I decided to discharge myself, take control of my own pain relief so I could have more access freely to my daughter, because I could see the big picture, I could see where this was going, and I didn't want this to be part of my birth journey. So that is what I did. And I was really fortunate enough to then go back to neonatal but we were really lucky to be given a family room near her incubator. So we stayed with her then for the next couple of days. And I continued to look for signs that this was a positive experience. Of course, I'd hoped to be at home, having my daughter, having those gorgeous golden hours, that golden time in bed, introducing her to her brother. That wasn't going to happen, and that was okay. I was allowed to be a bit like wobbly about it, but ultimately I knew that I was going to make it a beautiful experience. Um, so I still continued looking for signs. My day-to-day job, as well as teaching hypnobirthing, is as a primary school teacher, and one of my students' mums was actually leading the care in the neonatal unit. So straight away I was like, that's another sign. We're in safe hands. And yeah, we stayed in hospital for 4 days. And I really felt like I took control of my birth experience, control with what I could control, because of course, like with life, it is unpredictable. Birth is unpredictable too. But even when things didn't go to plan, I completely see now how your mindset can make all the difference. So I was able to stay calm, stay empowered, and feel in control even in an emergency situation. And I think having that knowledge of the maternity system and all those tools to really own my birth made such a difference to my birth experience. And had I not had that, it really would have been a different story. So I now look back on my birth experience knowing that it was nothing I could have anticipated or planned for. But I absolutely had my choices at the heart of it every step. And the way I feel about that birth is that I was in control, and it was just as empowering as when I gave birth vaginally to my son. In terms of establishing breastfeeding, so when I was back on the neonatal ward in the sort of the family room throughout the night, I was harvesting some colostrum because Poppy at this point was being sort of, I was having skin to skin contact with her, but she hadn't sort of latched on yet. I should add as well that this was at 30, she was born at 36 weeks. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. And she was very little. So when I when I was in on the ward, sorry, no, not when I was on the ward, when I was in the neonatal ward, I was harvesting colostrum regularly to kind of get that supply up. With my son, I breastfed him for a year, so I was really fiercely wanting to breastfeed. So yeah, I was getting my supply going, and then I think it was when she was maybe a day and a half old or something like that. All the hours seemed to roll into one, but she latched on and it was wonderful. And 11 months on, we're still going, and it absolutely has not affected um anything like my supply. But I do really think that because I advocated for myself, I knew the benefits of skin to skin, I knew I wanted to establish breastfeeding, it all came together. Because like I said, when I was on the ward, the midwife, because I understand that she had my health and my concerns at the heart of her, she was responsible for my care, but she was in no way being supportive of me wanting to try and establish breastfeeding with my daughter. She just wanted me to rest. But because I knew differently, I was able to make that happen.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bell Mama Hypnobirthing and Positive Birth podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave a review and hit subscribe on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an update. I'd love to hear from you, so if there's a topic you'd like me to cover, or a question you'd like answered, or if you'd like to share your birth story, please get in touch by email or DM me on Instagram. Until next time, take care.